Okay, today we're continuing our discussion on the development of Christianity in the early Middle Ages. We'll look at some of the political developments and the rise of Islam. Basically, two of the major world religions. Look at the life of St. Boniface, Tertullian, St. Augustine, St. Jerome. Look at the life of the Emperor Justinian, General Belisarius, the book Corpus Juris Civilis. It's spelled with an I because in Latin they don't have the letter J. Islam, Muhammad, early caliphs Abu Bakr and Muawiyah, Battle of Tours in 732, Charlemagne in France, or what would become France, and called the Carolingian Renaissance, the Treaty of Verdun, two other groups merging in Central and Eastern Europe, the Magyars and the Vikings, and look at Leif Erikson. Any questions on any of that? Okay. Now, I have all these saints and these titles flying about. Where did they get that from? I want to call somebody a saint. Well, it's a Roman Catholic tradition. Not one you see in the Baptist faith or Pentecostal faith very often, but basically there's a process they use to call somebody a saint versus not a saint. Not just names I necessarily throw out. You see, it's a big world and very strange things do happen. And investigating very strange things, and the Catholic Church actually has a department just for that. Now, process of becoming a saint is something conducted by the Catholic Church. Basically, has someone performed miracles or acted as a mediator from God to perform these miracles. And so all sorts of miracles recorded. The Catholic Church actually goes out and investigates these occurrences. For example, Pope John Paul II, who died 10 years ago, he's been canonized, been made a saint in the Roman Catholic Church. Starting from reports of miracles being ascribed to him. For example, this nun in Florida had Parkinson's disease really bad. She was given these gloves that were owned by John Paul II. She prayed, and her Parkinson's disease went into complete remission. Thoroughly documented, absolute fact. Something that's just not supposed to happen. So the woman is healthy, doing well today. You have other reports like that. People go to these shrines of these saints, pray for cures for diseases and things. Have things like incurable cancers going into spontaneous remission, people being healed of paralysis, blindness, things like that. They dig up the bodies of some of these saints and find out that they had decayed at all. A couple hundred years later, even. Very bizarre occurrences. And the Church now says this is a miracle. Now, Catholic Church, these very educated people, priesthood. Like I said, to be a priest of the Roman Catholic Church, you have to have a university degree. They will train you at these seminaries that are universities, very thorough. You know the Bible backwards and forwards. You are trained in the classical sciences, classical literature. You speak multiple languages. You know your way around the block. And so the Church, whenever they hear reports of this, they go out and investigate it. So they go out and say, okay, is there some kind? Has this actually happened? Is it not a hoax? Is it real or a hoax? If it's real, say, okay, is there some kind of natural explanation for it? They try to rule it out. Sometimes they can't. There's no reason why some of these things should happen, but they did. Except strange things do happen. You can find a natural explanation for it. For example, one day in the Middle Ages in France, it rained fish. I kid you not, it rained fish. Natural explanation? Of course. Tornado, water spout at sea, scoops up the school fish, gets carried on the jet stream a couple hundred miles. Gravity does the rest. Raining little fish. That does happen. In fact, there are actually cases where after tornadoes, they have reports of raining frogs sometimes. Yeah. So they go through, they investigate these things. It's someone that's responsible for it. And if you have one miracle, I describe it to you, the church has you beatified. Beatification. And you get the title, Blessed. Now, if you're your list of popes, you have some listed, just simply title, Blessed, whatever. Blessed Victor the Third, opened the 11th century. Blessed Urban the Second, and so forth. Blessed John the 23rd in the 1950s. Blessed. One miracle. Two miracles. You get canonization. Canonized. And that's when you get the title saint. Like I said, can you be alive and be a saint? It's happened a couple of times, but very, very rarely. That's the ancient history, but basically it's not until after someone's died. The church actually goes through and has a court to hear all this evidence in favor of beatification and canonization. Long, detailed process. Look at the character of the person they're proposing. The miracles they're alleging had occurred. They have to go through this long court process and actually have a person there arguing against beatification and canonization, called the devil's advocates.
Can you spell canonization?
That's canonization. Canonization.
C-O-N?
Yes, canon.
So that's where the term came from.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, in the Catholic Church, they have hundreds of saints. A lot of them are made patron saints of certain things. Basically, you have the saint, guardian angel kind of thing, person who basically looks over people in a particular field. You have patron saint for teachers, for nurses, for carpenters, for fathers, for mothers. Patron saint for animals, St. Francis of Assisi, so forth. Like I said, some of these saints have their own feast days. Basically, they, like I said, with St. Patrick in Ireland, you give thanks to God for this person and might be your good fortunes. Praying for God's supplications and bounty for you in your activities. But basically, that's how the process works. The Episcopal Church and the Presbyterian Church also follows as well, but they basically go take whoever the Catholic Church has chosen. But basically, big world, strange things happen. I talked about a couple of these people here, particularly about the role of Irish monks who are emerging in some of these monasteries. Some of these early religious figures, like Saint Benedict and so forth, they were important leaders in the church and inspired a lot of people to go a step further. For example, Irish monks, they're the ones who helped bring Christianity to England and Scotland, and further on into Germany. Here on page 199 you can see this. You have from this Saint Boniface. He was an Irish monk, from about 680 to the year 755. Called the Apostle of the Germans. He went to what's now Western Germany, converted Germans in Frisia, Bavaria, and Saxony. That's the entire area. So from Ireland, did a lot to convert people in that area, but missionary work is not always safe work. In this case, with the St. Boniface, he was trying to convert this one group of Frisians, this one village. They decided they didn't like him, killed him. Said martyr. That did happen to a lot of missionaries going back and forth. It's not necessarily all men. A lot of women were canonized as well. It wasn't just men leading these monasteries and these monastic movements. For example, St. Hilda of Northumbria. St. Hilda founded a monastery at Whitby in northern England in 657. In fact, she basically educated and trained 5 future bishops from her monastery. Basically, this is kind of a double monastery. You had men and women living in the same center, but like I said, you take a vow of chastity, so there's no fooling around going on. They said live in their own separate quarters. They're just strictly there to live a life of service to God. But later on, you do have convents emerging just for women. Monasteries coming strictly more just for men. But convents actually became an important outlet for women as well. In many areas, this is the only opportunity women had for any type of education. You're in times of possibility of living relatively independently as a nun. Taught how to read and write, and so go out and serve the church.
So why do people say that nuns
Just it's more of a stereotype of Catholic schools. In the early 20th century, had a reputation for very severe discipline, and like I say, corporal punishment is commonly used. But of course, in non-Catholic schools, those were also used. You have some teachers who are better than others. Some people who should not be working with children in schools. Basically, these nuns and monks get a reputation for beating kids sometimes, but like I said, no more than what happened in any other school. That's what you hear about with priests and children, so that's no more than what happens in any other organization. So we can sit here and name denomination after denomination and show you which one, what priests and ministers have done terrible things as well. In a religion of 1.5 billion people, you're going to find a lot of unsavory characters. Let's talk about Tertullian for a minute. Now, he's an early theologian living in the late 2nd, early 3rd century. And he's part of an intense debate within the church over knowledge of the classics versus just strict knowledge of the Bible. Some people saying that you need a classical education, you need to know about reading, writing, math, and science. Some saying, no, you just need to know the Bible, just need your faith, that's it. There's a huge debate in the early church over that. Still kind of find elements of still in the religious debate still to this day. But Tertullian, theologian, rejected knowledge and intellectual study. I mean, all the knowledge you need was in your faith, in the Bible. Anything else is just a distraction from your relationship with God. But he really kind of gets that debate going. But others believed you couldn't separate Christianity from classical thought, particularly as the Stoics were entering the religion and framing some of these theological arguments. But what is happening at this time, to get to the early Middle Ages, is start seeing a division occurring within Christianity. Remember, originally, Christianity is merging in Judea. So everyone there speaking Hebrew, versus local languages. The earliest books of the Bible are actually written in Greek. As Christianity spreads, particularly in Western Europe, Latin becomes the primary language of Christianity. But as it spreads in Eastern Europe, particularly Southeastern Europe, Greek is the primary language. This is causing some problems with the Catholic Church because they're trying to basically make policy for Eastern Europe as well as Western Europe. And these two separate languages and two separate cultures, basically, the Latin West and the Byzantine East. But try to explain some of these complicated theological questions about why certain things happen the way they do, trying to explain certain ideas about the nature of good and evil and faith and so forth. To really explain it, a lot of theologians turn to ancient Greek philosophers to kind of help fill in the blanks. Basically using the structure of the logic from their arguments to explain why these things, why the faith is practiced a certain way. And for these Christians, they're the ones that said you can't separate the classics from Christianity. You need a classical education to understand this in more detail. Basically, look at it from another point of view. As the Greeks would say, you have to be able to analyze things very thoroughly from multiple viewpoints, from multiple angles, to really understand a concept. So, more and more of these Greek arguments, ancient Greek philosophers, are being used in Christian theology. Tertullian says we shouldn't be doing that as Christians, but Augustine comes along and says, no, we need to do that. Actually, we start about St. Augustine, lived from 354 to 430. He's the bishop of a city called Hippo in northern Africa. He's not a bishop, he doesn't have a collection of pet hippos or anything. This is the city. It turns out to be a very important figure in the early church. He's born in North Africa to a Christian mother, but lived a life of debauchery as a young man, basically drinking, carousing, basically like the old joke, he spent all his money on alcohol and women and just wasted the rest. And was a professor of rhetoric at Milan in 384. So he's an educated man. And suddenly he converts to Christianity and returns to North Africa, becoming a bishop and becoming a very important figure in the church, particularly for two books he writes. One called Confessions. Yeah. It's his autobiography. I'm bragging about it. He's confessing, saying, I did a lot of bad things. But basically, what he's saying is, yes, I did all these horrible things as a young man, but I converted, and so Christ has forgiven me, everything's fine, I'm living a better life now. And saying anybody can have this kind of life too.
Literal sinner becomes a saint.
Yeah, literally. Second book was City of God. Still widely read. And basically he's taking on this argument on the classics of City of God. He says you need both the classics and faith. That basically using an argument going back to Plato is people live in two separate planes. He's described as the city of God and the city of the world. So while we're in this world, while we live this life in the city of the world, we need classical knowledge. We're going to be living, our faith and our hearts and our spirits may be in the city of God, and that's where we're ultimately coming, but we have to live here for now. We have to live in both worlds. And this became an important argument for Christian theology throughout the Middle Ages. It's the idea that we have to live in both worlds. This is the dominant idea, dominant thinking for centuries. It's still widely regarded as probably one of the best books on theology I've ever written. But, of course, life goes on. You have this guy, St. Jerome, coming along. Near contemporary, lived from 345 to 420. He had kind of mixed feelings about the classics, though. He kind of agreed with Augustine, kind of didn't. Kind of agreed with Tertullian a little bit, kind of didn't. But what Jerome does, though, is he translated the Old New Testaments into Latin. All these different sources, Greek and Hebrew and everything, brings it into Latin, creating a translation called the Latin Vulgate. This became the standard translation Bible for centuries throughout the Middle Ages. This is the one they're using, all in Latin, used throughout Europe. It's a very, very important translation of the Bible. It's basically is the one, all these arguments in the Middle Ages over the structure of the church, four movements in the 11th century, all be coming from this translation of the Bible. Now we talked about the Latin West. Let's talk about the Byzantine East. Go to page 202. And let's do this man here, Justinian. This guy in purple in the middle in this mosaic at the top. In the deep orange we see his empire, basically the remnants of the Eastern Roman Empire when he came to the throne. Now, the Eastern Roman Empire had a lot more stability than the Western Empire. They really thought it would be the weaker half of the empire, but actually they managed to turn it around and make it actually the stronger part of the Roman Empire, the one that's going to survive. They managed to repel these Germanic tribes back across the Danube River. They're managing to hold the Persians in the east in check. So right now everything's going well for them. So Justinian comes to the throne in 527. And he sees an opportunity. He sees that all these tribes that had eviscerated the Western Empire were very weak and could be taken over very easily by the Byzantine armies. So his dream is to restore the Mediterranean Empire with himself in charge of it.
This is still St. Jerome.
This is a Justinian.
Okay.
Yeah, St. Jerome, he is as much passage as you can find. So, Justinian, Byzantine Empire. Very ambitious ruler. Engaged in a series of massive building projects, particularly after something called the Nika Revolt in 532. Basically, a series of riots broke out in Constantinople. People rose up, nearly overthrew Justinian, but he sent the armies, crushed the rebellions, and basically rebuilt the city afterwards. In fact, Constantinople was the largest city in Europe during the Middle Ages. And Justinian built palaces, cathedrals, roads, bridges, walls, public baths. He had reservoirs to hold the city's waters underneath the city. A very advanced system. Also built hospitals and schools. Built a new amphitheater holding 40,000 and 60,000 people. That's pretty about 300,000 or 400,000 people. Huge city. Now, by this point, gladiatorial matches are being replaced more by a fascination with chariot races. Basically, Byzantines like chariot races. NASCAR, yes. But
Chariot races are dangerous.
they were. Could be like NASCAR, people want to see a crash. So he's doing all this building, very expensive, but he's got the money, he's got the time, he's got the power to make it happen. But to restore the empire in the West, comes down to this man, Belisarius, his general. one of the best generals of the late ancient world. So, builds up the army, turns Belisarius loose. And 533, in 2 successive battles, he destroys the Vandal kingdom. Absolutely annihilates them. None left. The Vandal kingdom. You see that little area here was now Libya and Tunisia that had been occupied by the Vandals around Carthage. Completely under Byzantine control. Vandals are gone. Next little bit of territory of southern Spain, some of the larger islands, think of larger islands in the Mediterranean. Then starts moving up the Italian peninsula. Remember, Italy, up to that point, had been controlled by the Ostrogoths. But here's a little harder. It takes about 18 years between 535 and 553 for the Byzantines to retake Italy. Very heavy fighting. At 535, he had retaken southern Italy, but moving up the peninsula and holding it a little harder. But by the time it's all said and done by 553, you can see here, these yellow areas, all of Italy, most of what is now Croatia and Slovenia, were under Byzantine control. So the Empire of the Mediterranean was mostly restored, except for Frankish Gaul and most of the Visigothic kingdom. Basically, he'd made huge headway. But this will be the absolute height of the Byzantine Empire. They're going to start losing it all steadily after this. What ended up happening, though, was the Byzantines overextended themselves militarily. They'd had the bulk of their army stationed still in southern Italy after they'd retaken Rome and conquered the Ostrogoths. And after Justinian's death in 565, another group called the Lombards is going to storm in here from basically the area of Austria and Hungary and are retaking most of northern Italy. But there are some important things taking place here because of Justinian. Think of this book, the Corpus Juris Civilis. Translated to Latin, this means body of civil law. Civil law. Basically a brand new law code written by Justinian. Turns out this is going to be the last major Latin work written in Latin in the Byzantine Empire. After this point, they're all going to be Greek. This is still in Latin. There's a codification, modifications of Roman law, and became the basis of law in the Byzantine Empire until it fell in 1453. But what's going to happen, though, is copies of this are going to end up in these monasteries in Western Europe, be written over and over and over again, the scriptoria, the writing rooms. And what ends up happening, though, is towards the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance, you're going to have people going through these monasteries looking for books like this. And Western Europe's going to be having all sorts of problems with contract law and property law and debt law because all this renewed trade, are trying to figure out answers for it, and they find this book here in all these monasteries, the Corpus Juris Civilis. Basically, the Romans had all the answers they needed for all these problems, or legal problems they're having. And with that, Corpus Juris Civilis basically becomes the standard for civil law in Western Europe in the early Renaissance. And only back here to Justinian. That's one reason why so many legal terms in law books are still written in Latin today. So attorneys have to know a lot of Latin to be able to understand the law, because legal concepts are still in Latin, dating all the way back to Justinian before that. But this has become a vitally important work for Western Europe. It's helping them establish and maintain trade, keep the momentum of the Renaissance going. But the last major work in Latin for the Byzantines. Justinian, for all of his achievements, though, was too much territory, too many enemies, and an empty treasury. And after he died, a massive plague broke out in Constantinople, vastly depopulating the city. By the 7th century, the Byzantine Empire is having problems because they're fighting more enemies to the north on the Danube River. Slavs in the north, particularly the Bulgars and the Serbs. And those groups end up storming across the Danube and actually establishing their own kingdoms. Basically had an area called the Bulgarian Empire for a while. It was a very large one, but it's along the Danube River and across it around the 1500s. Managed to defeat the Byzantines temporarily in 679 before the Byzantines were able to defeat and expel them. You have another one, the Serbian Empire, for a while. But they're going to be coming and going. The Byzantines are going to end up defeating them for a while. They're going to come back and be defeated again. And finally end up being occupied by a lot of Turks by the Middle Ages, later part of the Middle Ages. The Serbs actually ended up conquering the Bulgars as well for a while. But what you end up seeing in the Byzantine Empire, though, is Christianity becoming a more and more important part of the running of their society and their government. So look here on this mosaic here. You see to Justinian's left, or our right, these men here in these robes, they are priests. Notice the soldiers here on the far left of the page, to Justinian's far right, the Christian symbol on their shields. Now, in Byzantine society, up until the fall of Constantinople, the emperor is going to be portrayed as chosen by God, with absolute power. Basically, he's head of everything. He is the defender of the faith. And he also appointed the head of the church in Constantinople. Byzantines believe that God commanded them to preserve the Christian faith. And so the emperor, the clergy, and state officials are all bound together with the ideal that they're there to defend Christianity. And so this common idea of this common faith helped keep Byzantine society together a lot better than a Roman society could. But Justinian's successor, Justin II, so some things start falling apart for 565 and 578. So under Justin II, they lose northern Italy to the Lombards. But the Byzantines are going to hold southern Italy for the next several centuries. Things go along for a while. Then you have a new group come along. The Muslims, the third successor to the Romans. I got here to page 210. Now, the Roman Empire was still alive and kicking, and the Arab Peninsula was dominated by a group called Bedouins. Nomadic tribes who constantly find water and food for themselves and their animals. And some are getting into trading. So Arabia, particularly northern Arabia, was a very important trade route between the Far East and the Roman Empire.
They dominated what?
Arab Peninsula. Now, a lot of these trading, Bedouins got into trade. They started setting up their own cities as trading posts, became very prosperous. And after the Roman Empire caused disruptions and its eventual fall, a lot of these trade routes started shifting around a lot. So you have more people coming deeper into the Arab Peninsula than there have been before. Now, initially, all Arab tribes are polytheistic. I believe there's a supreme God ruling over them all, thinking all of them. This is Arabic for God. In their civilization, Allah is symbolized by a sacred stone, and each tribe had its own stone, basically a representation of Allah. They also worshipped one massive stone, a massive black meteorite called the Black Stone. It had been placed in a shrine called the Kaaba in Mecca. In ancient times, people believed that meteorites were messages from the gods. In fact, some kings actually had swords made from the iron from these meteorites as basically they can give them some divine mystical protection. This is something from the gods.
So that's why they go back to Mecca.
It's part of it. It's part of their tradition again. But they're going to add to it a little bit. Basically, still the belief that this black stone was a gift from God, from Allah. But they're also going to bury Muhammad there as well. Now, 5th and 6th century, all these disruptions over trade routes and so forth, you have this man named Muhammad enter into office. He was born into a merchant family around 570, orphaned at the age of 5, but grew up to become a caravan manager and actually ended up marrying the woman who owned the caravan. So he's actually doing very well in the Middle Ages. But he had become distracted and began to experience visions that I believe were inspired by Allah. So, according to the story, he went to a cave and meditated for 40 days and 40 nights, fasting. So basically 40 days, 40 nights in ancient writing was basically a metaphor for a very long time. But he went to concentrate on these visions and try to seek spiritual truths. And when he emerged, he had a new religion, Islam. Now, Islam in Arabic basically means submission to the will of God. So you're submitting to God's will, showing your faith. Now, Islam is a monotheistic faith. They only believe in one God, Allah. Basically using that same old God, basically discarding all those that it's just one creator God. But Muhammad had, in his revelation, said that Allah had already revealed himself in part through Moses and Jesus. That basically part of his Old Testament traditions of the Jews would have to be incorporated into Islam. See, Muslims consider Christians and Jews to be what they call people of the book. So Christians follow the Old Testament, the Jews follow the Old Testament, Christians follow the New Testament. Or Muslims believe Jesus was a prophet. They don't believe he was divine or the Son of God. Well, for Christians, that's a deal breaker. But for Christians, Jesus is the Son of God or he's nobody. But Muslims still regard him as an important figure. So he still had some important things to say.
So Allah was a
Prophet too.
prophet?
Allah is God.
Muhammad was the
But he
prophet.
didn't
Muhammad is the prophet.
Okay.
Muhammad is the prophet.
But he didn't have like a human, you know how Christ has like looks
And Muhammad, though, was entirely human. They said Jesus was entirely human, too. That's
that.
different from Christianity.
Okay.
I believe that.
Yeah. Except there are some Christians who do like Unitarians and stuff. But Muhammad was a prophet, entirely human, but just divinely touched. Basically, given these inspirations and these visions by Allah to spread this. And what Muhammad is saying, Muslim is saying, is these early prophets of the Old Testament, of the Jewish and Hebrew tradition, and Jesus, they had part of it right. But Muhammad's revelations through Allah are the final perfect revelation. It's the way it's all supposed to be done. Basically, Jesus, Moses, Daniel, all the prophets, they were just one piece of the puzzle. But this is putting it all together. Now, in Islam, we say Allah is God. He's an all-powerful being, created the universe and everything in it. Humans must subject themselves to all if they wish to achieve everlasting life. Because they have a version of heaven too. And followers of Islam are typically called Muslims. Now, his revelations were written into the Quran. A couple different spellings for it. Basically, hard to have a letter-for-letter translation from Arabic to English, but some are spelled with a K, some with a Q, but this is the Muslim holy book. Allah's teaching, Muhammad's teachings, revelations, and so forth. But as Muhammad receives these revelations, he goes to all the people of Mecca, his hometown, and try to get the truth of his revelations. People didn't take him seriously at first, but kind of got tired of him after he started condemning several prominent people in Mecca about some of their activities and business practices and so forth. And so in 622, Muhammad is kicked out of Mecca. And so he moves north to Yathrib. Just to the north of 622. Well, people of Yathrib were interested in him, especially what got him in so much trouble in Mecca, especially like the fact he's condemning some of their biggest rivals. And so they're sold on it. And so Yathrib is renamed Medina, which means city of the prophet. Again, one of the holiest cities in Islam. So Mecca is the first, most important, Medina the second, Jerusalem the third. But the year of this journey to Medina, 622, is called the Hijra. And it is year one in the Muslim calendar. So if you ever read Arabic news sites, the dates they will have on that, or particularly our Human Rights Project, looking at dates from writings from the Saudi Arabian embassy and so forth, the calendar they're using is the Muslim calendar here. Our date minus 622. So 1393, 1393 or in the Muslim calendar. But like I say, this is a very important event in Islam. His move to Medina, conversion of the people of Medina to Islam. And before this, basically believed the polytheistic old Bedouin gods, but now they're going to a monotheistic system under Islam. And so he just wins support of the people of the city. He starts winning support from the tribes, the Bedouin tribes outside the city. And from these groups, he forms the first Muslim community. And Muhammad becomes the leader of this community, first caliph. Now in Islam, there was no separation of church and state, but of course in Christianity, there wasn't either. That idea of separation of church and state doesn't come along until the 18th century, the United States. I believe church and state should be one and the same. So Muhammad is a religious and political leader. So what he does, though, is he organizes these Bedouin tribes who are known as very fierce and effective warriors into a fighting force for him. So in 630, he takes this Bedouin army of believers and goes and takes the city of Mecca.
What did you call them? The tribe?
Tribes of Bedouins. So the people are converted to this new faith, just a couple of years earlier. And from Mecca and Medina, Muhammad's ideas spread quickly across the Arab Peninsula. So by the time he dies in 632, most of the Arab Peninsula is Muslim. Now in Islam, there are called 5 pillars of the faith, 5 things that every good Muslim should do. Number here. Now, among these things is, first one, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. One thing you've got to believe. Pray 5 times each day towards Mecca.
A lot of praying. Right. A certain time after do it, or just 5 times?
Generally, particular times of the day can be midday, and there are times during the day that you'll hear over these loudspeakers throughout the Muslim community, at least these priests singing these songs. It's the call to prayer. Basically, the whole town shuts down, everybody goes to the mosque, and they pray. Yeah.
I was in Somalia, and then they played the music in the morning, and in the afternoon, evening, and then sometimes they go a couple of times at night. And that was the time to pray.
Yeah. Everybody close up shop, they go, they pray, and that would be it.
So if you don't go pray, you're a bad people.
Actually, not necessarily a bad person, you're just not doing your job. What you're supposed to do.
You're not Muslim.
So they're
Yeah.
strict, like
If they're very strict on a lot of things you have to do. So it's a religion, like a lot of religions, it's a discipline too. So you're trying to orient your life and your thoughts towards Allah. You're to observe the holy month of Ramadan. It's the 9th month on the Muslim calendar to the lunar calendar. Of course, since it's a lunar calendar, it shifts around a lot during the year over the Gregorian calendar. Basically, that time you're to fast during the day, from dawn to sunset. But at night, it's a time of family, feasting, friendship. But basically, it's a period of self-denial in order to see these spiritual truths for this entire month. Fourth, you're to make a pilgrimage to Mecca in your lifetime at least once. And of course, they do make exceptions if you're not physically able or not financially able. You don't have to do it, but they say it's something that's very strongly recommended. They call that the Hajj. Exodus is a very energetic time of year. People are just near frenzy. They have a lot of problems in Mecca. They have stampedes, people trying to rush to get to the shrine of Muhammad, which is right next to the Kaaba. Basically, stop, they go, they touch it, they pray, and they go on. That's millions of people a year doing this.
There's so many people that go there that the Kaaba is actually worn away.
Yeah.
People kissing it.
Actually, and the fifth, a Muslim must give alms to the poor. Basically, charity. How much you should give is defined as zakat, which is at least 2.5% of your income. Different amounts can be given in each religion, but the zakat for Muslims, you must give at least 2.5% of your income for charity.
Christians, isn't it like 10%?
Yes.
Yeah, called tithing.
Restaurants.
Excellent. Give that to him. You don't want to sweeten your food. Faithful observe the law are guaranteed a place in eternal paradise. Of course, those are condemned. They go to a version of hell. But it's one of the largest religions in the world today. It's got about 1.5 billion believers itself. Christianity has over 2.2 billion. But most Muslims are dominant. Islam dominates Northern Africa, the Middle East, portions of Eastern Indian Ocean, like Malaysia, Indonesia, are Muslim areas. It's kind of skipping over India and Southeast Asia. This is what they believe. Now, Muslim scholars, after Muhammad's death, drew up something called the Sharia. This is the law code based on the Quran. Now, under Sharia law, Muslims are forbidden to gamble, to eat pork, it's considered to be unclean, similar to the Jewish restriction on the diet. Can't drink alcohol, can't engage in dishonest behavior. Sexual practices strictly regulated. Contact between unmarried men and women discouraged. Now, in Bedouin custom, Bedouins were permitted in their culture to have more than one wife, but Muhammad tried to limit it to 4. But in most Muslim cultures, but again, you're talking about a lot of different countries there, a lot of more traditional conservative societies, that marriages are determined by the families. Women are to dress modestly, but that depends very widely where you're at. In Turkey, Muslim countries, basically straddling between Europe and Asia, women like Istanbul and Ankara dressed just like women here dress. Very Western styles. In some areas, like say Libya or Indonesia, might just wear, say, just a simple headdress or something, covering their head. But you go to some countries like Iran or Taliban-held Afghanistan, women are completely covered from head to toe. Different definitions of modesty based on different cultures. I'd say what women can do in these societies varies greatly. In Saudi Arabia, it's illegal for women to drive, but countries like Pakistan, you have women who have been prime ministers. Say Turkey, you have women are university professors, doctors, lawyers, ministers in the government, basically do anything and everything a man does. It differs very greatly. In Muslim culture, murder is a sin, also banned by Sharia law. So a lot of misunderstandings about Islam have crept up over the years in the United States. You have a lot of extremists in that group. You have extremists in Christianity, you have extremists in Buddhism, you have extremists in Hinduism. But no, not all Muslims are terrorists bent on destroying the West. If all 1.5 billion were determined to destroy Christianity in the West, we'd have a lot more problems than we do now. So most are very peaceful, like most Christians. We also have the concept of the jihad in Islam. It's debated very heavily, even within the Muslim community, what it actually means.
How do you spell that?
Jihad. jihad, which means basically, roughly translated means striving the way of the Lord. Basically, it means it's a religious and spiritual struggle. It doesn't necessarily mean waging war on non-believers. Actually, but there are a lot of disputes within among Muslim theologians what actually it does mean. But most Muslim clerics and theologians say it does not mean killing people who do not believe.
Like I've heard it meant that you were a Muslim warrior or a warrior and all that or something like that.
So
That one gets thrown around.
yeah, so they mean by warrior means different things. And Christian culture there in the South, you may hear the term prayer warrior. Does that mean you're praying and going out and shooting somebody? No, it just means using your spirituality, your faith, as a weapon against evil, as a source of strength for your own faith and for others. One Christian reformer in the Middle Ages wrote a book called Handbook of the Christian Knight. Was it meant just for knights who were fighting in armor at that time? No, it meant all Christians. It's the same thing, prayer warrior. But basically, it's the idea of just trying to channel your energies into something, a spiritual exercise of some kind. Now, when Muhammad died, that kind of left kind of a problem for them because while Muhammad claimed to be divine, there was no separation in their society between religious and political authority. But he never named a successor. He had several daughters, but never had any sons. So after his death, his closest followers selected Abu Bakr, his father-in-law, as his successor. And he's the next caliph. Caliph is head of the Muslim church and government. Abu Bakr is a wealthy merchant, father-in-law, is head of the Islamic community. And while he's taking charge, they are also spreading out steadily outward. See, look there at page 208. Just north of Arabia, you see Persians and the Byzantines. They're next on their list. Right on the way. The Battle of Yarmouk in 636, the Muslims defeat the Byzantine army. By 640, they take all Syria. This is under their emperor Heraclius. Syria had been very heavily Christian. Even this day, there's still a large Christian community in Syria. But Syria and Palestine fall to the Muslims. Jerusalem falls to the Muslims. But basically, what ends up happening is the Muslims are bottled up here in Asia Minor, what is now Turkey. Basically, it becomes a dividing line between the Muslim and the Christian world for many centuries. Basically, the Christians are able to hold in place, Muslims are able to advance much further. But as the Muslims head east, they take out the Persian Empire within 20 years. Completely destroyed. They move west into Egypt by 642. Cross North Africa. By 711, they're crossing the North Africa into Spain, wiping out the Visigothic civilization. And Visigoths so deeply divided the Muslims, destroyed them very quickly. Yeah.
Is it where Islam split? Isn't that has something to do with who they thought should succeed Muhammad?
Yeah, I mean Sunnis and Shia. We'll get to that in just a second here. Here's what happens is Ali, after Abu Bakr dies, Ali, his son, Muhammad's son-in-law, becomes caliph. But there's a deep division in Muslim society, and so a Muslim general named Muawiyah has him assassinated in 661. And Muawiyah and his followers form a group called, series of rulers called the Umayyad dynasty. They're ruling this caliphate for the next couple of centuries. But he moves the Muslim capital from Medina to Damascus, which is in Syria. And the division it leads to is between groups called Shiites and Sunnis. It's a very deep division, as deep as the division between Catholics and Protestants in the Christian world. Well, basically, the Sunnis are the ones backing the Umayyads. Believe those are the true caliphs. But the Shiites believe that Ali and his descendants were the true caliphs. But it's more than just political. There are some theological and doctrinal differences, but that's basically it. The Sunnis, the Umayyads, following the Umayyads, the Shiites following Ali. Most Muslims in the world are Sunni Muslims. But you have some areas of the Middle East, like Iran, is dominated by the Shiites. Most of southern Iraq is dominated by the Shiites. Baghdad itself dominated by the Sunnis. Saudi Arabia dominated by Sunni Muslims and so forth. So it's a very deep division. It's caused a lot of warfare within the Muslim community since then. Well, the Muslims keep charging north into Europe, but they're stopped at the Battle of Tours in 732, southern France. So Charles Martel leads an army of Franks against the Muslims, defeating and stopping the Muslim advance into Europe. For the next several centuries, the Muslims stayed bottled up in Spain. Now, at that point, get into the Carolingians. Charles Martel and his descendants, particularly Emperor Charlemagne. We'll talk about more next time.